Hello students and literature lovers, welcome to my channel, your one-stop destination for mastering English core for class 12. If you are new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss out on easy to follow explanations, revision tips and detailed content breakdowns. Have you ever stopped by a roadside stand while on a journey? What caught your attention? A jar of honey, a basket of fresh fruits, or maybe the simplicity of life on display. But have you ever wondered about the hopes and dreams of the people running that humble shop? Today we are diving into Robert Frost's thought-provoking poem, A Roadside Stand. This masterpiece isn't just about a simple roadside shop, it's a heartfelt commentary on rural life, urban indifference, and the silent struggles of the countryside. In this video, we'll cover everything you need to know about the poem, including the following. Whether you are revising for your class 12 English core exam or simply exploring Frost's brilliance, this video is for you. So grab your notebooks, hit that subscribe button, and settle in for an insightful journey into the world of A Roadside Stand. By the end of this session, you will have a thorough understanding of the poem and who knows, maybe a new perspective on life itself. Don't forget to like, share and comment your thoughts below. Together, we'll make your English core prep simple, enjoyable and stress-free. Let's begin with the poet himself, Robert Frost. Born in 1874, Frost is one of the most celebrated poets in American literature. Known for his deep connection to nature and rural life, Frost's poetry often reflects themes of isolation, struggle, and humanity's bond with nature. In A Roadside Stand, Frost brings his signature style to critique the social and economic divide between the rural poor and the wealthy urban elite. Through this poem, Frost highlights his empathy for the overlooked and the underprivileged, shedding light on their silent suffering. Now that we know about the poet, let's dive into the poem itself, breaking it down stanza by stanza to uncover its deeper meanings. The poet describes a small old house with a newly built shed by the roadside. The shed is being used as a small shop, hoping to attract travelers passing by. The people running the shop are not asking for charity. They simply want to sell their goods to earn some money. They believe that if they get some cash, which mainly benefits cities, it would help them survive and improve their lives. In this stanza, the poet talks about the travelers who pass by the stand. Most of them are in a hurry and don't bother to stop. If they notice the shop, they feel annoyed because they think the poorly painted signs spoil the natural beauty of the area. The signs advertise simple goods like wild berries, squash, and promises of peaceful rest in the mountains. But the travelers don't seem interested in these offerings. The poet speaks from the perspective of the rural people who feel frustrated when travelers refuse to stop or buy something. They aren't concerned about complaints that their shop spoils the scenery. What matters more to them is the sorrow they feel because their simple dreams are ignored. The people hope to earn money so they can improve their lives and experience the comforts they see in movies. However, these dreams are never fulfilled because the powerful and wealthy don't share their resources with the rural poor. The poet mentions a plan by the wealthy and politicians to move rural people to well-organized villages. They claim this is for the benefit of the poor, offering them a better and more convenient life. However, this plan takes away the independence of the rural people, making them dependent on the so-called help of the rich. The poor are promised a good life, but instead they lose their freedom and their traditional way of living. The poet expresses his deep sadness for the people running the roadside stand. They spend the whole day hoping and praying for at least one car to stop and buy something from them. The cars passing by represent the wealthy people who care only about themselves. The stand owners long for a single traveler to stop and ask about the prices of their goods, but their hopes are often unfulfilled. In this stanza, Frost sarcastically mentions plans by the wealthy and politicians to help the poor. They suggest relocating the rural people to modern villages near stores and theaters. However, this is not real help. It only makes the poor dependent on others, taking away their independence and traditional way of living. Instead of improving their situation, these plans destroy the simple joys and self-sufficiency the rural people once had. The poet sympathizes with the roadside stand owners. He imagines their constant disappointment as they wait all day for someone to stop and buy something. Their hopes rise every time a car slows down, but they are crushed when it speeds off without stopping. Their longing is described as childish because it seems innocent, naive, but never ending. The poet describes how the wealthy travelers are indifferent to the roadside stand. They do not care about the struggles of the poor and often find the painted signs unattractive. The stand owners try their best to attract customers by offering simple items like wild berries and squash, but the city dwellers either ignore them or look down on their efforts. The poet reflects on how the rural people never find financial growth or happiness because of their circumstances. The countryside's complaints seem to indicate that life there lacks opportunities for improvement. At one point, the poet even thinks it might be a relief to end their pain altogether. But then he quickly reconsiders. He realizes that he himself would not like it if someone offered to gently end his suffering. This suggests that despite their struggles, the rural people still have a desire to live and hope for better days. With the poem explained, let's move on to the critical analysis to better understand Frost's message and purpose. One of the strongest themes in this poem is economic disparity, the huge gap between the rich and the poor. The villagers at the roadside stand don't beg for charity, they just want fair opportunities to earn a living. But the city people who have all the money simply pass by without a second thought. The poet highlights how wealth is concentrated in cities, while rural areas continue to suffer. Financial struggles of the poor are often ignored by those who have the power to change things. Let's talk about the attitude of the wealthy in this poem. Have you ever noticed how people in expensive cars drive past street vendors without even looking at them? That's exactly what Frost describes here. The rich travelers in their polished cars don't stop at the stand. If they do, it's only to complain that it ruins the beauty of their journey. They fail to see the struggles of the people behind it. Through this, Frost criticizes the selfish nature of the privileged. Here is where Frost's sarcasm comes in. The so-called good doers, politicians, social workers, and planners claim to help the poor by relocating them to better places, but in reality, these schemes only make the poor dependent on the government, stripping them of their independence. Frost calls them greedy good doers and beneficent beasts of prey, a powerful phrase that shows how these so-called helpers actually exploit the poor rather than uplift them. Unlike many of Frost's other poems, this one has a deeply emotional tone. At one point, the poet even wonders if it would be better to put an end to the villagers' suffering altogether. But then he immediately questions himself. Would he like it if someone offered to gently end his pain? This moment of reflection shows how deeply the poet sympathizes with the poor. He feels helpless just like them, and this makes the poem even more powerful. A major literary feature of this poem is its irony. The villagers hope for customers, but the rich just drive by. The government claims to help the poor, but only makes their condition worse. Even the way rich people complain about the stand spoiling their view, this is ironic because they don't see the real issue, the suffering of the rural people. Frost uses sarcasm to expose these harsh truths in society. Now that we have analyzed the poem critically, let's explore the literary techniques Frost uses to make his message more impactful. Imagery. It helps readers visualize the contrasting scenes. The polished traffic symbolizes wealthy city travelers who rush past in shiny cars, showing their indifference. The artless paint describes the roadside stand, which is poorly maintained, signifying rural poverty. This contrast highlights economic disparity. Metaphor. The poet compares social workers and politicians to beasts of prey. This suggests that they pretend to help the poor but actually exploit them. Their greed makes their kindness false. Personification. The poet gives human qualities to cities, describing them as flowers that can wither. Cities are seen as flourishing while villagers are neglected and left to suffer. Symbolism. The stand is more than just a shop, it represents the poor's hope for better life. The cars passing by without stopping symbolize the indifference of the rich. It highlights the false hope of the villagers and the cruel reality of economic divide. The poor expect kindness, but they only receive neglect. Sarcasm. The poet mocks government schemes that claim to help the poor but actually make them dependent. Instead of empowering villagers, these programs weaken their ability to sustain themselves. Oxymoron. Beneficent means kind, while beasts of prey are dangerous. This contradiction highlights how those who claim to help the poor are actually exploiting them. Enjambment creates a smooth flowing effect, mirroring the poet's thought process, captures deep emotions, making the poem feel more natural and conversational. Alliteration. The repetition of S sound creates a rhythmic effect, emphasizes suffering and makes the phrase more impactful. Assonance. The repeated O sound makes the line flow smoothly, helps in creating a musical quality in the poem. Repetition reinforces how the poor are manipulated into believing that they are being helped, shows how false promises are repeated to maintain control over them. Contrast. The poet highlights the unfair distribution of wealth. Rich people live in luxury while the poor struggle for basic survival. Hyperbole. The city people exaggerate how the stand ruins the scenery, shows their arrogance and selfish attitude towards the poor. Juxtaposition highlights social and economic inequality, reveals the deep emotional divide between the two groups. Apostrophe. The poet talks to an imaginary person, revealing his emotional struggle and helplessness. This adds a personal, intimate tone to the poem. These literary devices enhance the meaning of the poem and makes its message more powerful. Understanding them will help in writing better exam answers and appreciating the depth of Frost's work. A poem isn't just about words, it's about the messages hidden within them. Let's take a look at the key themes that define a roadside stand and why they are still relevant today. The poem highlights the gap between the rich and the poor. The villagers set up a roadside stand hoping to earn money from the wealthy city travelers. However, the rich people do not stop to buy anything, showing their indifference to the poor's struggles. The wealthy travelers criticize the roadside stand for ruining the scenic beauty of their journey, showing their selfish attitude. The poem criticizes politicians and social reformers who promise to improve the lives of the poor but actually manipulate and exploit them. These greedy good doers make plans that do not truly help the villagers. Instead of making the villagers self-reliant, they force them into dependence, taking away their sense of dignity. The rich live in comfort and luxury while the poor struggle for survival. The villagers dream of a better life, but the city people do not care about their struggles. Instead of helping, the rich look down upon the villagers and their humble stand. The villagers feel hopeless and helpless because no one is willing to help them. They long for someone to rescue them from their suffering. The poet shares their pain and even considers the idea that putting them out of their misery would be a relief. The villagers believe in the illusion that city people will buy from them and improve their lives. Their childish longing represents their simple, innocent dreams. However, this hope is repeatedly crushed and they are left feeling disappointed. The poem contrasts the simple life of the villagers with the fast-paced, materialistic life of the city people. The villagers depend on nature and live with basic needs, while the rich enjoy luxuries without concern for others. The poet shows sympathy for the villagers who live in harmony with nature but struggle to survive. The villagers dream of being noticed and helped, but this dream remains unfulfilled. They wait endlessly for someone to stop at their stand, but their hopes are repeatedly crushed. The poet highlights how difficult it is for the poor to escape their suffering. Poverty is not just about lack of money, it destroys hope, confidence, and dignity. The villagers feel mentally exhausted and emotionally drained because they see no escape from their situation. The poet too shares in this deep sorrow, feeling helpless in the face of such injustice. Some words and phrases in this poem carry deeper meanings. Let's go over them so you can use them effectively in your answers. Students often misunderstand certain parts of this poem which can cause them marks in exams. Let's quickly go over the most common mistakes and how to avoid them. Students may confuse the tone of the poem with humor or sarcasm rather than recognizing it as somber, reflective, and critical. Focus on the serious critique of social inequality and the disillusionment with the wealthy. Students may think polished traffic refers only to clean or well-maintained vehicles rather than understanding it as a metaphor for wealthy, indifferent travelers. Recognize that polished refers to sophisticated and uncaring city dwellers passing by. Some students miss that the poet is criticizing politicians and social reformers for falsely promising improvements to the poor, making them dependent instead. Understand the poem as a commentary on the failure of social welfare schemes. Students may confuse out of sorts with simple confusion or discomfort when it actually refers to the rich being irritated or bothered by the poor. Recognize that it signifies irritation or displeasure at being confronted by poverty. Some students fail to identify that the phrase greedy good joyers is sarcastic, implying that the so-called helpers are actually selfish and exploitative. Pay attention to the irony in the term to grasp its critical tone. Students may focus on the physicality of the roadside stand, just a place to sell goods, without connecting it to its symbolic representation of hope and struggle for the poor. See the stand as a symbol of the villagers' desperation for survival and recognition. Some students may miss how the suffering of the villagers is connected to larger social issues like poverty and economic disparity. Understand that the poem critiques the indifference of the rich to the suffering of the poor and the illusion of upward mobility. Students may read the villagers' longing for a better life as innocent dreaming, missing its tragic and unfulfilled nature. Recognize the longing as a sign of frustration and hopelessness, as it's never realized. Some students may take artless paint at face value as just bad painting without recognizing it as a symbol of simplicity and naivety. Understand that it represents the humble, unpretentious nature of the villagers. Students may overlook the emotional weight of the phrase, trusting sorrow of what is unsaid, thinking it just an expression of sadness. Recognize that it reflects the unspoken suffering and resignation of the villagers who are left voiceless in their struggle. By avoiding these errors, you can better understand and analyze the deeper meanings of the poem and prepare more effectively for your exams. Now let's tackle some probable questions you might face in exams. The roadside stand is a small shop built by poor villagers along a highway. They set up with the hope that wealthy travelers passing by will stop and buy their farm produce or handmade goods. However, their expectations are rarely fulfilled. Instead of receiving support, they are ignored, leaving them in a cycle of poverty and despair. This stand is not just a place for business, it represents their hope for a better life. The phrase polished traffic refers to the wealthy travelers who drive past the roadside stand in their luxurious cars. The word polished suggests refinement, sophistication, and urban wealth. However, it also highlights their indifference. They are too focused on their own lives to even notice the struggles of the poor villagers. Frost uses this phrase to criticize the widening gap between the rich and the poor. The villagers wait eagerly for customers, hoping that city people will stop and buy something from their small stand, but their hopes are crushed when travelers either ignore them or just get annoyed at the sight of their shop. This deepens their sense of helplessness and frustration, making them feel invisible in a world that refuses to acknowledge their existence. The poet describes how the rich travelers view the roadside stand as an eyesore. Artless paint refers to the simple, unskilled way the villagers have painted their shop. While the villagers see it as a source of hope, the city people see it as something that spoils the beauty of the landscape. This contrast shows how the rich fail to understand the struggles of the poor. The phrases greedy good doers and the beneficent beasts of prey are used sarcastically by Frost to criticize social reformers and politicians who claim to help the poor but actually exploit them. These so-called helpers promise better lives for villagers, but in reality they take advantage of their situation for personal gain. Instead of uplifting them, they make them dependent and helpless. The poet expresses deep sympathy for the villagers. He can hardly bear their suffering because he sees their unfulfilled hopes and broken dreams. He feels powerless to change their condition, and in a moment of frustration, he even wishes that their suffering could end in any way possible. This line reflects his anger at social injustice and the cruelty of economic disparity. The poem paints a clear picture of the gap between the rich and the poor. The villagers are simple, hard-working people who only wish for a better life. On the other hand, the rich are shown as indifferent and self-absorbed, too busy to notice or care about the poor. The contrast is evident in phrases like polished traffic and artless paint. Through this poem, Frost criticizes the insensitivity of the wealthy and questions the fairness of society. And finally, let's wrap up with tips to score full marks in this poem. Exam questions often test your depth of understanding, so you must be able to explain the poem in simple words while staying close to the poet's intent. Well-structured answers show clarity of thought and make it easier for the examiner to follow your argument, leading to better marks. Using direct references from the poem demonstrates textual knowledge and adds authenticity to your answer. Literary devices are a key part of poetry analysis. Identifying and explaining them correctly can help you score extra marks. Competency-based answers must show deep understanding, application, and critical thinking. Avoiding common mistakes ensures you don't lose marks due to minor errors. Time management is crucial in exams. A well-timed answer ensures clarity and completeness without unnecessary details. Practicing questions enhances confidence and reduces mistakes during the actual time. If you understand the poem well, write structured answers, use quotes and literary devices correctly, and apply critical thinking, you can easily score full marks. And that's a wrap on our detailed breakdown of a roadside stand. I hope this helps you feel ready for your questions. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe, like, and share it with others. Keep practicing and you will do great in your exams. See you in the next video.